Hello, I'm Maya Leapens from Chapel Art Studios, and I've got with me today Rosalind Davis, author of What They Didn't Teach You at Art School. Rosalind, do you identify as an artist?
Yes, very much so. That's my primary role, really. I studied art at Chelsea Royal College of Art, and it's a big part of my practice is making art. So yeah, I very much do. I mean, that has expanded into being a curator at Collier Bristow Gallery now, but also doing independent projects and writing and teaching, actually, which I also see as an extension of being an artist in terms of sharing information and knowledge that I have, and vice versa, really learning from other artists and other curators and writers and things. So it's a two-way street as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
What does being an artist mean to you? Because there's lots of different sorts of artists. How do you see yourself or see your role?
I think for me, being an artist has many functions and roles, really. I think for me, being an artist is about capturing and expressing something that you are maybe processing or seeing or experiencing around the world, and translating that into an artwork. It can also be a means of education. It can be a means of expression. Obviously, for artists, it definitely is, but for other people to kind of experience that as well. It can be about politics. A current show I'm exhibiting at the moment, Border Controls, is very much a kind of political exhibition in terms of what our kind of concepts are behind the work, and what Justin Hibbs and I, who were doing the collaboration, are thinking about where we are politically. And as a curator, I also do that too. And that sort of plays into it, really, in terms of bringing other artists' opinions, views, ideas, into the world as well, and supporting those things too. And also, being an artist is a huge, we actually contribute a huge amount economically, and culturally, of course. London's one of the sort of top cultural cities in the world, and that's because of the art that we have here. It's not because of our politics. So yeah.
What are one of the biggest professional challenges you've had as an artist?
Professional, as in practice?
Yeah.
I had a very hard time. First of all, a little in terms of my practice of sort of being stuck, basically, and having quite a fallow period. And I had just done an installation at the Furniture Makers Hall in 2015, and I didn't know how to kind of progress with it necessarily, just because of the way that I'd made this installation. I couldn't really move it forward that much, and I just had to keep going. And I had to keep drawing. I very much sort of encourage people to think of their practices as being something like a job, or it's obviously a vocation, but that you just have to keep going, even if it's difficult to be in the studio. And if you are also going through those things, it's really important to then just get out and look at art, and not just go to the tape, but go and, I guess, look and feed yourself in other ways if you're not sort of feeling that you can make something in the studio. And I got through it, and I did lots and lots of drawings, and then the most wonderful thing happened is that turned into sort of the large body of work that I'm still working on now, which is sort of making modular installations and sculpture. So yeah, you just have to ride it out, and everyone has it at some point, I'm sure, and for different lengths of time.
Yeah. How do you think you overcame it, in your head, from stuck to not stuck anymore? Was there anything that stood out?
I just kept drawing, and my partner, he was very encouraging of the drawings. I just didn't know where it was going, and in terms of, was it going to develop into a painting, because that's often how I used to make work, is from photographs through to drawing through to painting, and it didn't feel right. and it just, I got to a point where I was very happy with a particular drawing, and I could see that I could take a sculpture or sculptural elements out of that and literally turn it into a drawing in space with steel, and then got steel made, and then it sort of got into I got to use the project space in the studios where I was at, which was really large, and it was just that zinging moment when things fall into place and you think, okay. And now I've got this kind of endless building system, because all of my sculptures, they're all different frames, so I can take them apart, put them back together, and I find that really exciting because I can realize infinite amount of ideas in a day. Yeah. Whereas, you know, there's often a kind of very slow part of making work, really, and this is sort of suits my nature somewhat more. Yeah.
What would you say has been the most rewarding moment of your career so far?
One of the real standout moments for me was finding myself on somebody's sketch pad. Well, actually, my friend sent me a picture of my work in somebody's sketch pad for students, and that was really rewarding. You know, that's like amazing moment, really. And I mean, just keeping on going in a way is rewarding. You know, the different conversations, the different exhibitions that I've been part of and been privileged to be part of. I mean, you know, every opportunity is significant because I learn from them. And so that's kind of a rewarding thing. And it sort of goes back to being, what do you like about being an artist sort of thing, is that constantly learning, meeting new people, working with new people, collaborating, working with new spaces. So it's, you know, it's a super rewarding career. Of course, it has its ups and downs, but yeah, it's very rewarding. Yeah.
How has your practice evolved over time?
Well, quite a lot. I mean, if you look at my website, you'll see there's a bit of an archive, and even that's an edited archive. I mean, I used to make a lot of paintings when I left Royal College that was very much about buildings related to, well, that had a social housing kind of history and background. And I was using a lot of printed fabric and embroidery in a different way. And that's changed a lot.
Yeah.
I sort
what
of
were you
still.
doing with the embroidery before?
Sorry, what was that?
What were you doing with the embroidery before?
The embroidery was used in much more as a reparative kind of gesture in my work, and it was building up kind of surfaces. It was so it was much more dense. Now it's much more intervening and more directing, and also serves a purpose as sort of puncturing space. Yeah, so but the elements are still there of architecture being the thing that informs my practice the most, is that form and space. So that hasn't changed, but what the work looks like changes, and I'm really happy about that. I really wouldn't want to still be making those paintings, you know, 12 years after I left art school.
Yeah. So. What does your process look like?
My process it varies really. It's quite expansive in terms of what I'm looking at. As I say, drawing is a big part of my practice, and photography. I like to experiment with a lot of materials. So at the moment in the studio, I'm doing kind of assemblages, really, in amongst doing these kind of larger scale installations. So there's something that I'm working on in the studio all the time if I'm not showing in a sort of large space. So I'm thinking about all of those things, really. And a lot of it's in my head that I'm just looking at photos I've taken, looking at shadow and light. And I think sort of as you develop as an artist, maybe, your visual capacity in terms of what informs you becomes larger and larger, really, I think. Yeah.
Where does your thinking start? Like, what's the behind the scenes before it gets to the
well, making installations, there isn't a lot that I can do beforehand. I have to really, I go and see the space. So with border controls that I'm showing at the moment in Seven Oaks Kaleidoscope Gallery. Going to see the space, having pictures of the space, figuring out measurements, which is all not, you know, is part of the process, but it's not like exciting in that sort of sense of explaining. But and then I'm just really trying to think about the space and how the light might work, and doing drawings sometimes to do with the space. I mean, I have a solo show next year. Oh, I've just lost you.
You're back.
Oh, fine. I have a solo show next year at the Foundry Gallery, and that's quite a complex architectural space. So I've got to go and sort of inhabit it a bit, really, and sort of see how the light works through the day, how the lights themselves work through the day, and what I might do site specifically to bring together a new installation. And that's quite challenging, because until you get everything into a space, you don't know what's going to work. So often it will be like taking an excess of materials and then stripping things back. But yeah, I'm hoping, that's really how is kind of being in a space as much as possible, and being able to play is a big part of my practice, and it should be, you know, the playfulness of it, really. Yeah.
What question should I ask next? What has worked best for you when it comes to sharing and promoting your work, and why does that suit your personality?
Sharing my work, apart from obviously the obvious of having exhibitions, is social media, and that's been really good. It suits me because I like to have conversations and I like dialogue with other artists. You know, when I was a graduate, it was like Facebook was about it, that was it, and MySpace. And it wasn't very easy to connect or make a network. And I very consciously strove to engage with that whole process, you know, when Twitter was sort of first started, or well, I probably started a lot after Twitter started, but kind of as a way to not just promote your work, but to have conversations. And then it's obviously extended to Instagram. So I use both of them, and I also use them as research tools, and I use them to promote organizations and people that I've worked with and so on. So I find that really wonderful. Like before I had social media, I would have shows and I would think, okay, no one's going to come. And they didn't. In the early days, you know, friends and families and a few people, but that's really built with having like a supportive network. It's really that's really valuable.
Yeah, that's one of the topics of the talks that you do, isn't it? The social media side.
Yeah, it's an element. I do a talk about that separately, but I will be talking about it when I come to Winchester in terms of the values of it. It's sort of also the strategy of using anything to market your practice. It's never like just about talking about yourself and just about your work. It's much more, it's meant to be conversational and sharing, not just about that. So yeah, there is a big element of networking, which, you know, people don't like the word sometimes, but I just think it's like having the potential to have a great conversation that leads to something exciting, whether that's just a good conversation or it's, you know, could turn into an opportunity.
Yeah. What have you learned from your career as an artist that you would most like to pass on to other practicing artists?
The thing I've learnt is to really appreciate the opportunities that you get given and maximize them. When I was at Royal College of Art, came out as a painter, but I was in textiles, and so I mixed media textiles, which was very open and very experimental. And a couple of us were sort of majority were kind of going through sort of towards a more fine art aspect. And our tutors, Freddie Robbins, is a fine artist, and and that taught me I needed to be proactive about my practice in terms of not being in the fine art department, in terms of meeting curators or galleries or, other artists. So, I found that a really useful thing to be proactive and to kind of pick myself and represent myself, because you are your sort of best ambassador, even if people don't feel confident about that initially. I think, you know, talking about your own work with passion and articulation is, no one can do it better in a way, if you kind of can gain the confidence to do that. But, and also to say thank you is such an underused word in the art world, you know, and I say that as both an artist and a curator, to kind of really be thankful for the opportunities as well, and the people that have helped make that happen, whether that's another artist or curator, gallerist, whatever, you know, people organizing talks like this, you know, it's like, say thank you. That's a lot of time and effort from somebody. So yeah.
And it really is what makes things happen, isn't it? The relationships, the conversations.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's you know, the reason I'm coming to see you guys is because of Susan Francis, and we worked together on an exhibition years ago, and we've kept in touch, and you know, she's come to visit other things, and I've kept an eye on what she's doing. And I think that's the wonderful thing is, you know, also I get offered opportunities to exhibit, which is what you want, but repeatedly, like as in I've shown with Art House One once. I did a curatorial project. We're going to back there with another show in 2019. No Format Gallery, where I had a solo show in 2017. They asked me back to come in 2018. You know, and for, it kind of works in lots of different ways, as well as sort of curating. You know, I meet a lot of artists through that who are also curators. And over time, you know, you just build these relationships, and you know, you value them. And it's really fabulous to sort of see people going off as well, and developing their own projects and supporting those, really.
So you attribute the being asked to exhibit largely to showing up for the conversations and, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, very much so. I think obviously you can apply for opportunities and so on, but for me, the opportunities have mostly been born out of relationship building and like just being a nice person, maybe is sometimes helpful. You know,
over something that might even not be the art in the first instance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean,
I think a lot of people feel the pressure to represent themselves immediately in the first moment, and of course you are, but all you need to do is start the conversation, isn't it? Because then that opens up the opportunity,
yeah,
conversation, and get to, you know, all the interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that you know, yeah, it can take a bit of time and confidence, but you know, the way that I see it is that you have to stand behind your work. Like, I didn't spend 7 years at art school to be like, well, I'm not going to talk about my work, or I'm not going to market it, and I'm just going to do it over here. And you know, I wanted to exhibit, but also part of that is I don't just want to have exhibitions. I want to work with people, and I want to make it as the best I possibly can. That means that I also need to market it. I also need to spend time writing a press release, or you know, and I take that all really seriously. And you know, unfortunately, that's some things that other people don't take as seriously. They think I've got an exhibition or I've got an opportunity, yay, and then you know, that's it. And actually they should be trying to get, you know, the most embarrassing thing I can think of is coming to an exhibition that I'm part of and like bringing one friend or something, you know, and that's fine at the beginning, but again, you sort of want to, you know, I want to bring people there. I feel a sense of responsibility, but also very consciously invite people. You know, I write emails and I send letters, and you know, and it's every opportunity. You have to make the most of it, as if it's like, you know, solo show at the Tate or something.
Yeah. Okay. What decisions, activities, or support have made the biggest impact on your professional practice?
I mean, I've sort of already kind of said, in the sense of representing yourself and picking yourself, you know. I mean, in terms of the wider aspect, in terms of historically, is that I set up 2 arts organisations that I ran for 5 years. So one of them was Core Gallery in Deptford, that I managed and curated shows at. I learned a lot there, and I met loads of people. I met loads of other artists and curators, and then set up with Annabelle Tilly Zeitgeist Arts Projects. And again, that was 3 years. That was incredible, experience. Not only just working with artists and curating, and we ran artist education program, much like what you guys are doing, creating opportunities, but also just learning on the sort of management side, and what works and what doesn't work, and getting experience and skills, and a lot of that was, either voluntary or unpaid in a large part, not sort of significant amount of money to do, but, God, it was enriching, and, that community is still around, in the large part, like Susan, but also like I'm now showing Kaleidoscope Gallery, which is what I used to call Zappers, one of my Zappers, Ros Barker, set up, and that's been fantastic. And sort of in terms of career-wise, I think, there's been some pivotal exhibitions that I've been in terms of developing the work, that I had an installation at the Furniture Makers Hall, which leaped my work into new areas, and then I showed the No Format Gallery, and again had this great possibility that's led to another shows, and it's also making them, the Furniture Makers Hall was a show that lasted, which I shouldn't probably tell you now, or I'll tell you anyway, but see if anyone's done their research, but lasted 2 hours effectively in terms of the private view. And it was reviewed on AN, and my work, this new body of work, was talked about by this art critic and reviewed, and it was such a fantastic moment, sort of critically and artistically for me, that really moved my practice, I suppose, in a rewarding way. Then I had the fallow period, and then I got back out there again, and and had sort of amazing things happen along in the last sort of 3 or 4 years with exhibitions, and also getting the job at Collier Bristow Gallery as a curator there has been very significant to me. I had a part-time job working in health regulation, and for 3 days a week whilst running arts organisations, teaching, writing that book, what they didn't teach in art school, my practice, and it just took some of that pressure off. But it's also something I massively enjoy doing, kind of curating, coming up with ideas and working with artists. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So we asked a couple of questions on Twitter.
Yeah, I like you people on Twitter. You're very nice.
And so these are some questions that were asked. Sarah Misselbrook wanted to know, do you set some kind of control, self-discipline, or any creative structures in this world full of distractions?
Well, thanks for the question. That is a work in progress. I have a lot of jobs, and being an artist is one of them, but it's not the only one I have. And again, like, being an artist is not just about being in the studio. You have to kind of go out, do your research, get inspired to, go and support other artists. So it's tricky. I try to be quite strict if it's a studio day, which is usually weekends and Mondays. That's when Justin is in the studio too, so that's kind of, I don't often get there till after lunch, but I like to have a clear run of a day, to be honest. That really helps, because it takes a while for me to clear my head and concentrate, because I'm thinking about this, that and the other to do with my my career, and so I try and be strict about that time. But I just, basically, the thing that's most structured is not having a structured social life. And and trying to introduce routine where possible. So when you know, when certain days are certain things really, or certain timings. It's a balance really. I don't find I get lost in social media. I don't find like, oh, I've just lost an hour looking at Instagram. I go in and I go, you know, I do have a look around, but I also use a lot of dead time, and I travel a lot for work. So that's also utilizing time there to try and clear some of my admin. So, so that when I'm at home, I can be in the studio. But yeah, it is, there are a lot of distractions. I mean, I think it's very, in terms of like the social life thing, it can be easy to be distracted by that. And I very much say to people, I'm sorry, I can't come, I'm working. And that's a good strategy for all the people that want to chip away at your time in the nicest possible way. But, you know, but also with that, I mean, like, you know, people thinking because you're an artist, it's okay to ask you to go and do this chore and that chore and interrupt your time. And actually, I think you have to really guard it as much as possible. You know, and people understand that. Most of my friends are artists, actually, so they understand that sometimes, you know, when Justin and I are like working so much, that we need to have some space for our practices as well. And that might mean not going for brunch or Sunday roast or something, but you know, there's payoffs, and I do get to do those things sometimes, like my birthday, Christmas.
I thought of another question, but I'm going to get to the end. If I forget, remind me about the multidisciplinary, you know, doing lots of things.
Yeah.
Another question we got from Twitter was, I think we might have answered this one as well. What support structures allow you to function as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, sort of friends, artist peers. I mean, talking to other artists provides me structure. I mean, I didn't grow up with any kind of structure or financial security or family money and all those things. So, you know, it's very much, I had to be very independent and make a career. And I'm self-reliant really in that sense, sort of financially, which obviously helps with being an artist, because that does require investment, and it allows me the freedom to invest in my practice as well. You know, I think it's very hard to sort of not have money and be an artist, so you kind of have to be inventive about what those things might be. And you know, yeah, it's support structures is kind of self-discipline of myself really, I suppose, as much as possible, and I don't have it all the time. So but yeah, I think, you know, getting the job at Collier Bristow Gallery, as I say, it's a consistent job in terms of it being a freelance sort of role, but you know, with a contract, so to speak, that I have some security, which is incredibly difficult just to be juggling lectures and things and hoping that enough will come in every month, which I tried once and it was really tricky and just worrying. So not having to worry about that is really useful. I know it's taken a long time to get there.
Yeah. I'm going to ask that question now.
Okay.
So we've got this talk coming up that you're doing in Winchester.
Yeah.
Thrive and Thrive as an Artist. And a couple of people have said, oh, this is great. Wow, she's actually a practicing artist. Like,
yeah.
We're actually getting advice on how to do this from somebody who actually is doing it.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But I feel like there's also this implicit other aspect of or a resentment sometimes that artists express towards having to do all the other stuff other than the art, so as if somebody who is an artist who also does these other things is doing that because they can't make their art a success, when in actual fact you know, you're showing you are making it up a success, but there is more to life and stuff. I was wondering if you had anything you wanted to speak about that, on your observations and how you.
Yeah, I mean it's me being an artist talking to artists, I think, is really helpful with a practice that is still making work. I think you sort of, I can see it, and also being a curator and all the other things that I've done, I see it, I can see things from both perspectives, and I think that's very helpful to be able to get an insight into, say, a curator's process or so on. Yeah, there can be, you know, resentment, like, why do I have to do all this extra stuff? And I just think you have to get over it, really. It's the 21st century. You have to be a professional person. And yeah, sorry, it is going to take a bit of time, and you do need to spend time in your statement, because actually that's something, for example, that can be a real deal breaker. Most people don't spend enough time on it. I've read hundreds of artist statements, so I say that with a degree of authority and helped a lot of people with their artist statements. But it can, you know, actually, you know, spending time on something like an artist statement can be very healthy for your practice. You know, it's very healthy to reflect, it's very healthy to know your context, it's very healthy to see where you've gone and where you might be going. And I think that's really, really important. But I think also, like, the other part of it is, again, sort of thinking about something like an exhibition not being just this transaction, and thinking instead, and not just about selling work, you know, like, that's a really, I feel, unhealthy way in many respects to kind of view them, because exhibitions are so much more than that. And if you just base it on money and this is a transaction and somebody's going to sell my work, then that's going to lead to a sort of an unhappiness with your practice. Whereas if you look at every exhibition as this opportunity to meet new people, you know, experience new things, be inspired by other people around you, be inspired by a space, collaborate, learn, teach, then it's so much more. It's so much richer an experience. You know, selling work is something that's happened to me in the past. You know, when you said what's the most rewarding thing, selling work can be very rewarding, and I have utter respect for people that are able to do that. But it's not a thing that I rely on or think of it being the way I measure my own success, because that's a very tricky road. Because as artists, we're living in a different kind of value system than capitalism. So you have to kind of think about all of those things, and, you know, and if you can, like, for example, the social media thing can be something people feel very, very resentful about. Well, why do I, you know, oh, it's just people talking rubbish. It's not. It's an amazing environment in which you can have enriching dialogue if you choose to do it. Now, would you prefer that, or would you prefer to be making your work in isolation and never meeting other artists? Well, I know which one I prefer. And so you just have to kind of, you know, get into it like an exercise. You know, it's like, I like running, but I don't like the idea of running at times. And I sort of think, oh God, do I have to go for a run? When I was going for dance class or something, I'm like, yeah, that's easy. I can go and do that, and I know I'll enjoy it. But I know that it will make me fitter and stronger and healthier and better and all the rest of it. And you do start to enjoy it. Yeah, the first 5 minutes aren't fun, but then you start to get your rhythm and you start to breathe, and, you know, it's kind of thinking a bit like that. It's being an artist like a sport as much as anything.
And reminding yourself, I am committed to this. And
yeah. And I do see artists that don't engage in those sort of things, and they sort of, after a couple of years, they sort of realize something's not going right, because people have stopped taking an interest in their work since their degree, where they were offered this, that and the other. And so again, you have to kind of maintain, it's for the long term.
Yeah. The last question was from James Eldridge, and he wanted to know why art? He is an artist himself, but he's interested in, you know.
Why art for me, or just why art?
You could interpret it either way, but I think he meant, of all the different ways that theoretically you could do the things that you do, what is it about art? Why do you practice art?
Well, thank you for the question.
Hard one.
uh, well, why art is because life would be nothing without art, really.
Hmm.
That's it. I mean, in a nutshell, really.
I
Um,
totally agree. But but for those who maybe aren't artists and don't understand that, why why why
why art?
would life be nothing without art?
Well, can you imagine living in a world with no arts and no artists? I mean, that's a terrible thing to contemplate. I mean, it's certainly difficult enough, and you could choose not to do it, because actually, to be honest, it's extraordinary to be an artist, to make art, because it's very, very hard vocation to have. It's got no structure, really. Uh, it's got no, like I sort of talk about it in the talk, there's no golden ticket. There's no, like, it doesn't just go in an upward trajectory. There's lots of amazing things that happen, but there's rejection, there's, disappointment. A lot of artists suffer from depression as a result of these things, as well as other factors. um, but God, you have to be like a warrior to be an artist. Why art? Well, you know because it's a wonderful thing to have in the world, that, as I say. But to be an artist, I think, takes persistence and determination and passion. And what it brings to you as a result of all of those things is the most wonderful experience. The way that artists develop their thinking processes, the way that they educate, the way that they're creative and problem solvers, these other skills that we have, the things that we bring to the table are so valuable. It's not just making a piece of work, it's all of those other things too. And one of the main things that artists are problem solvers, solving their own problems in their own work, and as well. And I think that is deeply important, and even more so, in terms of it being something to use to educate, to protest, to explore difficult subjects as well.
So finally, what can people expect of your talk in Winchester on the 1st of December, which is Saturday morning, called How to Survive and Thrive as an Artist?
All of this and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be different from this, obviously, which is a really lovely opportunity to kind of be asked some of these great questions, all of these great questions, and which has been about me. But my talk is more about you as an artist. And I mean, it's a 2 hour, two and a half hour kind of. It's practical. It's it's insightful. I mean, it should make you come out of the room feeling a little bit bouncier. But yes, navigating a career as an artist. So there is a lot of philosophical aspects that I've sort of mentioned or touched upon now. But the ways that we have to really look at opportunities and how to make more of our opportunities. There's lots of different threads, as we know, like I've kind of mentioned them, but you have to market your work, you have to be, project manager, you have to be researcher, blah blah blah. And so what's the best way? And it's kind of trying to there's information that's going to be really relevant no matter what any stage somebody's career is at, because it's another insight. Obviously it's a great networking opportunity to meet fellow artists, and and in a really encouraging and nurturing environment. That's part of it. And obviously it's great when I get to meet new artists as well. But yeah, and also, I mean, in terms of Chapel Art Studios, I do lots of talks, but a lot of them are private talks for universities. And so this is an opportunity that doesn't come around so much as it used to. When I used to run my own things, I was setting up my own talks all the time. So yeah, it's a rare opportunity to get to a public event, really. So yeah, come along.
Yeah, we'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
You can book tickets either on Facebook at Chapel Art Studios, or you can search on Eventbrite for Rosalind Davis, How to Survive and Thrive as an Artist. Thank you so much, Rosalind.
My pleasure. Thank you for spending time on coming up with questions and setting this all up. Yeah, and thank you. Thank you to anyone who watches this. Let me know what you think on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
Yes, what's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is just my name, Rosalind Davis. On Instagram, I'm Rosalind NL Davis, for somebody nabbed that. And yeah, Facebook, I'm just me. Yeah.
Just me.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your website, and I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to probe the relationships between both the physical and psychological aspects of space?
Well, architecture is never just a physical thing. Architecture has a lot of layers to it, particularly for me, how you feel in a space, in terms of you have a sort of psychological associations with different kinds of architecture, even just, you know, external, but also internally, different sorts of uses of a space. So whether that's, you know, a domestic space or a office environment, what does that then symbolize? What's the history behind that? Who's lived in that space? What were they like? You know, it's very, a building is very psychological because it's imbued rather with all these layers of, you know, I'm very sensitive to space, you know, as many people are, but if I go into a particular space and I might feel claustrophobic, or I might feel this isn't right, I don't feel comfortable here. You know, we all have that, and that's to do with space, and that might be because of a particular kind of architect. So I think as well, things like windows and doors, when you're using them in an art context, again, they have a different meaning. They've got a layered symbolism. They, you know, what is a door? Is that an entry or an exit point? What's a window? Is it the inner going into the outer, or the outer to the inner? So I use them, you know, even they're in my paintings, but they're also in my installations I make. So they're very door-like, window-like frames, and room-like, actually. So, and that's to do with the experience of space, and I suppose recreating some of those aspects. So yeah, there's never, again, even with furniture, there's never anything that has just a purely physical experience, really. It's always, it's a very individualistic experience of space.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's really good. All right, now properly for real, switching off.
Okay, all right.
Right, bye-bye. Well, not bye, but bye to everyone who's watching.
Bye.